Hello and welcome to Global Data Thematic Intelligence. Our team tracks over 100 tech, industry, ESG and macro themes impacting all major sectors. I'm Kris Cooper and today I'll be talking to Allison Lobb, Executive Director of Bankers Without Boundaries. The firm describes itself as a not-for-profit powered by investment bankers to assist high-impact projects that benefit the environment and deliver social good. Today, I'll be discussing how Bankers Without Boundaries works to garner public and private institutional support for a range of decarbonisation and social good projects. Hi, Allison. How are you doing today?
Fine. Thank you for having me, Kris.
Great. We're excited to have you on the podcast today. To begin, can you tell us why the firm was founded, how, and the structure and how it works?
Absolutely. So Bankers Without Boundaries was founded 11 years ago in 2013 by our CEO, Rupesh Madlani. He was a former top-rated research analyst, and alongside our chairman, Angus Forbes, who was a top-rated hedge fund manager. Both of them wanted to do a little bit more for the actual environment and for society as a whole. And so the aim of Bankers Without Boundaries is very much to leverage the skills of the investment banking community, but more with a focus on the environment and society at large. So together they have hired a group of former investment bankers from across the many aspects of the private finance world. And we are working together to really focus on making a difference in terms of the work that we do from an environmental and social point of view. So everything that we look at now has to have, an impact lens to it. And we look to put our banking hats on and see if there's a way that we can indeed help move things forward from a climate finance point of view.
Mm-hmm. And so recently the firm was involved in the launch of the Climate City Capital Hub in partnership with the EU's Net Zero Cities, with the goal of securing private and public investment for the decarbonisation of cities across Europe. And could you tell me why this hub is needed?
Absolutely. So across Europe, we've been working with 112 cities through the Net Zero City Consortium. There are obviously a lot more cities in Europe than that, and 377 had actually applied to the initial call to look at how their cities can become net zero by 2030. You can only imagine, though, that when you take one city's investments that are needed and then scale that up by 112 cities, you get to a fairly big number. And we all know that public finances are quite stretched across the board, and there isn't an awful lot of government money available to fund the necessary investments that are needed in order for cities to move towards net zero and to decarbonize and indeed become more resilient to the challenges that they are facing. So the aim of the Climate Hub is very much to bring in private capital alongside the public capital. And that hopefully will just allow us to leverage the public capital in a more meaningful way. But also, there are a lot of projects which are very attractive to the private sector on their own merit. And cities aren't necessarily best placed to reach out to the private sector or indeed to understand the different arms of financing that are available. So the hub will work with cities and encourage them to think a little bit more out the box. It's not just about asking national governments for support or indeed looking from your own municipal budget. Actually, we can go to the cities and say, here is this great solar PV project, and here are a couple of people we think would be very interested to finance these projects because it is a very interesting and indeed fundable project that the private sector would be interested to look at.
So if you're explaining the role of Bankers Without Boundaries in the Capital Hub, it's sort of lining up what are financially viable and attractive decarbonisation projects with the cities and then with the investors.
Absolutely. So we have done a lot of work with the cities around project preparation, and the hub will indeed do some technical assistance with cities to help get projects ready to be financed by the private sector. The other thing that the hub will do, though, is provide a neutral capital centre. So it is very much we are not worried where the money comes from. We are here to crowd in all types of capital and indeed challenge cities to think about how they can use that capital to further their projects. So a combination of technical assistance and a neutral capital centre. And then on top of that, there's also tools to help cities understand where their projects are in terms of project development, and therefore what further help is needed before they can become fundable. And we are also deploying city finance specialists on the ground in cities so that there's an increased capacity in the municipality to work on their investment plans and indeed to really drive the investor outreach with the local investor networks and the national capital stacks that exist in every European country. So 4 main areas that the hub will look at. Bankers Without Boundaries is the main financial partner, but we have a great lineup of technical assistance partners who work with us. And together we aim to deliver those services across those very 4 clear verticals.
Mm-hmm. And so these cities are probably most used to trying to obtain public investment from various European Union associated bodies. But how is the process that Bankers Without Boundaries assists with for obtaining private finance different to the process to obtaining public investment?
Yeah, I think it's quite a different process. Not least, investors want to be involved in these discussions from an early stage so that they can really form the structure, form and have a view into what the financial structure looks like that a city is looking to use. It's also a lot around providing documentation and doing the due diligence that the private sector need, which does tend to be a little bit more enhanced than what you would expect from a public sector project. So providing the sort of financial acumen and help that cities need in order to build financial models, in order to build economic models, to do investor pitch decks. Those are sort of skills that don't currently exist within the city landscape, and the hub will very much help cities do that. And the other thing that we will obviously look to do is just try and help leverage that public capital as well into the private sector, because you do tend to find that certainly, if you do have public money backing a project, it gives a bit more credibility and reduces the credit risk of a project. And then that does tend to attract more private capital alongside the public funds that are available. And we absolutely need to do that as we roll out and look for what is a very large sum of money that cities need in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And currently, is a lack of private finance the biggest barrier to European decarbonisation? Or are there other challenges from Bankers Without Boundaries perspectives that also need addressing to get to these decarbonisation goals?
I think there's a lot of challenges that are out there, and I would rephrase it. It's not so much the lack of private finance, it's just the lack of capacity to engage that private finance and potentially interest. There is no doubt that it is easier to attract private capital, public capital, because you don't need to do all the enhanced due diligence and all of the enhanced modelling that has to come with a private investor. And I think that has scared cities away. So capacity is one of the big things that we do see coming up time and time again. It's just finding the right people to help the cities, and indeed in the cities, to pull the documentation and information together in order to attract the private capital. In general, it doesn't tend to be a technology problem. There's quite a lot of very good technology solutions that you do find across the infrastructure. It's much more capacity to actually get the business plans up and running from within the cities, which is where we really see the challenge. And the other side of it is really a policy discussion, in that there are rules and regulations in every country which are very different. And actually some of those inhibit flow of capital, and indeed planning permission and regulations that come alongside that can also inhibit the projects actually moving forward at the pace that we need them to. So there are definitely other things that we look at across the consortium in order to help cities move forward. Policy, citizen engagement being another one. You can find as much private finance as you need to fund these investments, but if the citizens of a city don't get behind it, then you are sort of somewhat throwing good money after bad. You need to encourage citizens to get behind these projects and behaviours to change if you want things to really be successful going forward.
Mm-hmm. And we've been speaking a lot about cities across Europe and them as a focus for decarbonisation. But in terms of the other work that Bankers Without Boundaries does, sort of how are you offering advice to corporates more broadly, and why is that necessary and significant?
Absolutely. So we have a investment banking arm that works directly with corporates across the globe, not just in Europe. And that can be anything from companies who produce sensors to count how many biodiversity species there are in any one area, all the way through to, farming seaweed at a commercial, a commercial scale. And again, we can provide help with them. You do tend to find impact or more nuanced tech solutions struggle to get the airtime across some of the more larger and commercial functions that are out there. And so I think our financial advisory arm and investment banking work focuses much more on those more niche companies who need that incremental help because they're not quite commercial enough yet to attract the regular banks that perhaps you would reach out to. So we do a lot of work from a corporate finance point of view for corporates in the sustainability space, helping them move forward. We've done a lot of fundraising, everything from venture capital and Series A funding right the way through, working with companies who are looking to IPO because they've got to size and scale now where they can look to do that. So we do offer quite a lot of your regular run-of-the-mill investment banking services, but very much with a sustainability lens to corporates. And most of the companies, if not all of the companies we work with, have to have some real societal impact, which is why we are working with them. So very much we are involved in that space. And as I say, involved in that space globally because our employees are based all over the globe. Whilst we're headquartered in London, we have people in every continent and do quite a lot of work across Africa, Asia, and indeed the Americas as well.
Great. Well, that's all the discussion we've got time for today, but thank you for sharing your insights on finance and decarbonisation. It's been really interesting to hear your perspective on these matters.
Super. Well, thank you for having me. And there's a lot of work to be done, a big challenge ahead of us, and always interested to reach out and speak to any investors, indeed, who want to come along with us on this journey and potentially look to invest in some of the projects that we have going on at any point in time.